Peace, 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 everybody. How you doing? I hope you had a wonderful day so far. My name is Keisha. I'm the owner of A Way of Life. I am a career and business coach using astrology. Today I'm going to be discussing the esoteric version of this Jupiter entering Pisces. I'm going to break it down from an esoteric point of view, and hopefully by the end of this, the goal is that you see this from the point that religion and the planets are astrology. They are all one and the same. And what is, if you will, the missing piece? I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm currently taking this class. I should get a picture of it so that you guys can see. With Dr. Nateri. She is a metaphysical teacher, and she teaches esoteric knowledge. Now, I've done a class with her about 5 years ago, a long time ago, a while back. And I only got through halfway part of the class, and then I went off and, other things happened in my life. I got some education in astrology, but of course it's a Western astrology. And now that I'm back in the class, I'm beginning to put the pieces together now from an ancient astrological point of view, which has been very, very interesting. And so, again, I hope that explaining this, it gives you some kind of inkling of esoteric knowledge and how it all relates to what I do here. So, the solstice. Now, this is all predicated to the solstice. I think this happens maybe about 8 days from the solstice, because Jupiter enters Pisces on the 29th, and the winter solstice is on the 21st or the 22nd. And there's some question about it even being on the 24th, and I'll talk briefly about that as well. But the idea is that the earth kind of tilts, right? This is all we took a science class, right? And we understand what the winter solstice is. When the earth tilts to one particular side or another, speaking of winter, we'll talk about it speaking more on the southern part, right? It just means that, our days on the western side become longer, and on the southern side, they become shorter, right? So this is like Australia and all those places there. Like they're having, spring for them now? Or maybe it could be summer. So we're having winter, and that's all predicated to the tilt of the earth. And so this is a relationship between the earth and the sun that we're describing here. And that officially happens for Capricorn season. And when we're doing it the other way around, that's Cancer season, because Cancer is the opposite. For summer season, it's Cancer, because Cancer is the opposite of Capricorn, right? And as the earth is rotating, it's also going through each of the zodiac signs, and that's how we measure time, right? And kind of how there's a saying in the conscious community: as above, so below, or as within, so without. And when we're saying that, what we're saying is, everything that's happening up in the atmosphere is channeling down here on earth and within us and out into, the world and how we manifest our daily reality. And there's even there's this like sexual metaphor between the sun and the earth. And that is also related to religion, where they say, that we are made from clay and water, right? Those are all the feminine energies. And that represents earth, right? It also represents us in a kind of way, right? That we're matter and that we're 80%, 90% water, And so there's that connotation there. And then, we get the spark from the sun, from Prometheus. And Prometheus is the archetypal description of Pisces, right? So, and I did this a while back. I did a whole bunch of posts on the archetypes for each sign, meaning the gods for each sign. I think you can still go back and find that on my IG page. So Prometheus is telling, I'll put it like this. Pisces is telling the story of Prometheus. So a lot of my Pisces people, if you go back and look at all the stories for Prometheus, you'd probably find some very significant similarities within your life that you could relate to. I'd be willing to bet that you could. And you can see that depiction also being played out in my little chart here. Now, this isn't the correct chart. You know how, if you've ever gotten a reading from me, I pull up a chart for you. And that all that chart is depicting is where the planets were when you were born, right? And so if you see this darker line going straight across the circle here, the lower half would represent the winter season, even though it's on the top. Try not to get confused. I don't want you to overthink this at all. I just want you to see how the chart expresses where we are. Now, if I had a real chart and I put in the real dates and stuff, all the Capricorn, Libra, Taurus, Aries, they would kind of be Scorpio. They would all kind of be down here, down on the bottom half, which would represent the winter solstice. And then on the upper half, you would get all of the summer solstice, and now our days are longer days, which is the bottom half of the chart, also known as the incarnation. And then the upper half, which is the shorter days, also known as spirit, right? And the Bible is based on the same system in the ancient stories. All the stories in the Bible are a collection of books from all the religions, all of them. They are celestial. They are related to the Greek myths, the Odyssey of America, the Mayan, Japan, and their ancient stories, the Mesopotamia, even Maui, Samaria. And, India has probably one of the biggest ones that I've seen, honestly, in a while. But all the myths are stories of our fall from heaven. That is what these stories are telling us. As spirit gods, immortals, you can even say, they're telling the story of how we kind of fell down from heaven to live this experience here on Earth, matter. And that is essentially explaining the separation of self, or knowledge of self, of who you really are, who you truly are. And the astrology that I kind of discuss here every week is kind of what we are literally talking about, our traumatic experiences and how many different ways that can show up. And what I'm learning in this class right now that I was talking about earlier in the video. So what did Jesus mean when he said, to enter the kingdom of heaven, you must be born again? So all my religious people out there, you probably know this better than anybody. There's something in the Bible that says that where Jesus says, to enter the kingdom of heaven, you must be born again. And Jesus is a depiction of our higher self, the divine twin. Yes, the divine twin. That's what I said. You didn't mishear me. The divine twin, which are the twins. Gemini represent the twins. In the mythology, it's Castor and Pollux. And I think I talked about this in another video that I did too, when I was dispelling the misconception of Geminis, because they often get a really, really bad name. And so Castor is immortal and Pollux is mortal. And the god of Neptune, the god of the sea, which is Poseidon, has it out for Odysseus. I think I'm saying this name right. The god who is keeping him from getting home back to heaven. And he's angry at Odysseus because he blinded his son Cyclops and taunted him for it. Now, Cyclops is one of Poseidon's many children, right? And I found it very interesting, by the way, that Poseidon was the one who raped Medusa in the temple of Athena, for which she was punished for, which is just another indication of, these stories are just another indication of really the trauma that we kind of experience and endure here. Now, not to say that that means that if you have some kind of Pisces placements, that there's rape there. That's, honest to God, it could be related to anybody, and it can be related in any kind of way, metaphorically speaking. It doesn't have to be exactly that. But really, again, it's just a traumatic experience, that she was turned into the monster of Medusa. So we kind of have all these different personalities, which represent all the different astrological signs, right? I've explained that to everybody before. You really do yourself a disservice when you say you're just one sign, because you really are all signs and you're multi-talented. When I was thinking about this, I was thinking about, even in the superhero stories, right? All of them kind of have this traumatic experience where they got, turned into, something that made them this monster now, where they have this superpower ability, or like even the alien movies. Every alien movie is predicated on this, like they're super, super intelligent. They can have conversations and things with you and you don't even know it. They're in your head, you know. They got these, they're like these superhumans, right? Or just super people. Obviously they're aliens. That's a conversation for another day. But you know, the idea is that we are meant to be great. I mean, when you think of a fall from heaven, if you're a spirit now in matter form, human form, and you are separated from yourself, then you are this superhuman. You know, that's why the symbolisms and the things that we see in this world on a consistent basis, we're always kind of drawn to them, because I'm pretty damn sure it's because intuitively, somewhere deep down inside, we know that, like, that's us. You know, that's who we truly are. That's our, you know, the self that we've been separated from. But we don't know that, right? It's very, very Neptune, where it's ethereal, and it's like, nah, that can't be real. It's just a dream. It's just a movie, right? It's just a book, right? But that's the thing about being down here on this earth, is that it's like constricts us and suppresses us, with all these things that are like, no, you're just a human. And if you do have all these talents, for instance, you're an artist and you're really good at playing music, then there's like this one lane that you got to go in and fit into. Like, you got to fit into a mold to live out that dream, to be that artist, when you probably are like, yeah, I can do that, and I can do a whole bunch of other things. I'm great at lots of things, you know. And you know, those are just more examples of the traumatic experience of being down here and being suppressed, because that's what happened when Poseidon had it out for Odysseus. You know, Poseidon cast Odysseus down to earth for many, many years and said, you're gonna suffer and not know who you are. Your knowledge of self is going to be taken from you. You can't suffer, struggle, pain for what he did to his son Cyclops, you know. And I talked about this in the Gemini video. Sorry for the pause. And I talked about this in the Gemini video, that, you know, how Gemini plays a part in this. Am I moving ahead of myself? Yeah, I'll get into it more. But the idea is that, you know, we were sent down here to suffer for Odysseus's, and there are many stories, by the way. It isn't just this one story. This is just the one that I picked, obviously, because it was predicated to Poseidon, who represents Neptune. And so, you know, the bottom line is that we're kind of here to suffer intentionally. That is the true story. You know, obviously we could talk about slavery. You could see that through slavery. We could talk about this from many different perspectives. Doesn't really matter how you chop and screw it up. The bottom line still remains the same, is that it's talking about this fall that we have from heaven to come here to experience this pain, if you will, this traumatic experience. But, you know, it doesn't have to be permanent. And I think that's the part that we have to work through, like the story of Inanna, I think I'm saying that right, in the Gilgamesh, the Age of Pisces, you know, really talks about the separation of self and in general, but she hung herself on a hook, but she's indestructible. She's a god, right? She has the power, the skill that I was talking about to get through the trauma. You know, and this is all really related to the Pluto return we're having in America next year. And I talked a lot about that. Pluto in that video, I talked a lot about how some of those things can be played out. But ultimately, it's a chance to purify the trauma, you know, to get a clean slate in that area of life to allow us to really move forward from all of this. And every time we go through some kind of traumatic experience, it's always through Pluto, the underworld, right? Remember, this right now in the winter solstice, as we are in longer days, it's the dark night of the soul. It's the incarnation to go within and do the work, you know, to remember who you are ultimately. And so this is even predicated to like all the manifestations that you're supposed to do during a full moon. How are you supposed to do those? What time you're supposed to do those? So the winter solstice is, I think it even started somewhat like the 17th to the 24th. I mean, again, some people would argue with you that they celebrated from the 17th to the 21st when the winter solstice actually takes place. But what happens is that the moon disappears for 3 days after that and doesn't reappear again until the 24th. And so that's kind of where that whole argument comes in. And again, that's just the process of the dark side of the moon and what it means and what we should really be doing as a people to manifest to get through this traumatic experience, right? So then there's another story. The three wise men weren't just some dudes who went on some interesting journey and then came across a child in a manger. You know, they were not just wise men, rich people from Jerusalem. They were astrologers who studied the stars. They knew there was an amazing constellation configuring in the sky at a certain time that would birth an avatar in Bethlehem. Now, this story ruffles a few feathers because, again, it's celestial we're talking about here. We're all talking about how this relates to the sun, stars, and the moon up above and how that correlates to, you know, what's going on down here. And so there's some inconsistencies with that story, but I'm not here to argue that fact. I'm just here to say that they're all one and the same, inconsistent or not. They are depicting actual things that we kind of experience down here on earth, and we can see all of that in the Bible. So Zeus, who is also depicted as a god or your higher self, he saw a beautiful mortal queen. Her name was Leda, that he wanted to have sex with, which is Zeus's whole story. If you know anything about Zeus, he made sure her husband witnessed that act. So one of the twins that Leda had from Zeus was born a son of Zeus, and the other is from her husband, who's mortal. So Castor is mortal and Pollux is immortal. And this is going back to the story of the twins and how that relates to our story here. And so they live their lives, whatever, going through battle, doing what they do. And Castor dies. But because he's mortal, he couldn't be brought back to life. You know, Pollux went to his dad. He said, you know, Castor's dead. Is there anything that you could do for him? And he said no, because he's mortal. That's his fate. But what he did do was gave Pollux the option to go to the underworld to spend half of the year with his brother. And that story within itself is a story of us taking in that two sides of a coin, right? Understanding that, yes, we are mortal people here living this human life experience, but we are also spirit. We are still, you know, our higher self through spirit. And how do you connect with that, understand that, know that? It's knowledge of self. So the consistent play here is to not get attached to anything down here on earth through knowledge of self, through your spiritual practices, following, you know, the universal law, or what do they say, the 42 laws, which is not in the Bible. And I think that's the book of Enoch that they don't have in the Bible, which is an argument of whether or not they should. But I think the bigger argument is why they don't, because of what it talks about there. And essentially what it has taken away from us are, you know, knowing the difference between the consequences for not knowing yourself or living within the spiritual practice, and there was another one that, oh, it just missed my brain. But I know consequence was one of them. So essentially we get to come down here and live our whole best life to be trifling as we want. That's essentially the story, right? But it affects us in a way because, you know, it takes us off our path to knowledge of self, or even recognizing knowledge of self. Like, we don't even know who we are when we look in the mirror, because we don't have any consequences, real consequences for when we're doing something we're not supposed to. And there's, you know, and there's things that you could do to I want to say, to reprimand yourself for that. Essentially, it's discipline, you know. You know right from wrong, you know. And how do you kind of contend with that? I like to think it's the depiction of Karate Kid, you know. It's not about fighting, but you should know how to fight, right? To protect yourself, right? To live your life in harmony, like all, you know, that entire ancient Chinese culture, what they represent, what they're all about, living within the alignment, within the vibration, within your intuition, knowing right from wrong. This is where you kind of become the Buddha, right? You know if something's not going right in your life, not to indulge in it, or be a victim of it, or even believe that it's actually real, because it is not real. You know, the idea is to meditate and go within, stand firm within the negativity around you, and rise above the nonsense, right? Essentially, that is the process in which you get to go back to heaven, right? Yeah, you know, that's kind of how I view that. But I think they tell this story in Doubting Thomas, where Doubting Thomas in the Gospel of John. So what they don't tell you is, so Thomas essentially is talking to somebody in doubt, They refer to him as his twin in that scripture. And when he has doubt, the twin heals. But essentially the twin is the spirit, the inner self, the higher self, right? That's the story of our lowest self, ego, which often, by the way, your ego will fight the hell out of you down here on this plane to do everything in its power to convince you not to change. You can even see this in people who, like us, like kind of live their life in this image, right? Where they kind of feel like, you know, their conformity to keep the peace just to get by. So essentially we kind of unplug down, we kind of plunge down that great fall from the heavens into our human form. And that's always going to come with some kind of drama, because that's life here on earth, you know. So the journey is to learn to deal with that trauma. And that's the rebirth. And again, we kind of all know situations in our life where somebody lives in that space of, they seem like they're really put together. They're comfortable in their own skin, and they live from these kind of principles, right? And if you've ever been in this situation, you as yourself, that you could probably think of a few times where you would be having these kind of intelligent, intellectual conversations with people, and some people will run, or they'll get like a bite back of that. They don't want to hear, they don't want to deal with that because it's too much to bear. You know, the trauma is too much for them. They're just perhaps not ready. But we all have access to these characteristics, and those are the characteristics described in every single one of the zodiac signs, right? And I talk about this quite often. You have the higher vibration of the sign, and you have the lower vibration of the sign. But it's not about trying, it's about healing. And when you heal, you heal others. And that's what the celebration is really supposed to be about during this Christmas celebration. You know, going back to celebrating. I think they said, again, it started on the 17th to the 21st, that they would celebrate Humpty Dumpty. You know, that's what the song Humpty Dumpty was really all about. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king horses and all the king men couldn't put Humpty together again. But within this process, what you learn is that, again, your higher self has the ability to help you put the pieces back together again. And when you learn that and you understand that, you acknowledge that, again, these are when you do your manifestations, you show gratitude, you're grateful, even though your world could be upside down, but you've mastered the ability to accept the fact that that's what life here is on earth. And it is your job and your responsibility to do the work to find yourself, to stay within yourself. And when you get lost, you know what to do to get back on track. And essentially, this isn't a process that's, you know, you just learn it and then it's over. You know, this is years of work. You know, years of work. It never stops. And the stronger you stand in that power, the stronger you become. And another way to look at that is you evolve as a person. I talk about this all the time. Evolving as a person. It's like an initiation. You know, that's another way to think about this celebration. All it is an initiation that you've learned something through the BS up until this point. You celebrate, acknowledge, and now you get ready for the next battle, because Halloween is the same thing. But that's the plunge into the body, the fall within the body, the spirit going into the body. The first birth is the celebration, which again is Halloween, of the dead, right? The celebration of the dead, Halloween. And then 40 days later, which is an indication of how long it takes to have a baby, you do the Winter Solstice, which is the second birth that they also talk about in the Bible, And that's the battle between, well, I don't think it's Anne and Lil, but I mean, essentially, it's just another traumatic experience, because even coming down that canal when you're being born, there's a struggle there, But I hope I didn't mess that up too bad. I feel like I was kind of all over the place. But the truth is I'm still learning. And if I did this from the language of which I'm learning it from, you really would have been all over the place. It's just as bad as reading the Bible. Language-wise, they got all this language that's raw. And I'm like, what? But I get the sentiment, though. I understand the storyline because I grew up Baptist. My grandfather was a minister. And then I've been through all these other spiritual practices. Even when I was going to college for my bachelor's degree, I took a world religion class, and I learned the same thing, that all the religions are the same. And again, just the same as you only see yourself as one in particular sign, you're doing yourself a disservice, because if you're only doing one religion, the truth of the matter is you're only getting one side of the coin. Do them all, look into them all, and don't discriminate, and respect the fact that we were all split up. That's the story of the boat that nobody really wants to talk about, by the way. And so I'm not going to impose that on anybody, but, from my knowledge and perspective, the African people were all put on a boat and dropped off and shipped into each and every one of these countries all around the world, and as they did that, they started their whole life all over again. So those religions became different things, and they took on whatever culture they were dropped off in, and so we really have to remember those things too, that we are not separate from one another. We all are going through this together as a people, as a unity. And I think ultimately that's really what Jupiter and Neptune means to me. And it's not going to be easy, because Neptune is the sign of, on the higher vibration, detoxing. On the lower vibration, it is the actual drug, literally. It's you being asleep and not knowing who you are. It rules drugs, alcohol, addictions, illusions, delusions, your victim mentality, and so we're going to struggle, there's going to be some things we're going to feel that we are not going to like. But again, on the higher vibration of that, we also are going to have this really amazing opportunity if we do it right, if we're open, unconditional love, right? A flood of watery emotions in the best kind of way, and an awakening to the fact that all those lower vibrational things that might be taking place in our lives, right, are taking place. And we have the ability to change that now. Detox from it all. Let it go. And take faith in the fact that, yeah, without all those things, like, oh my God, which fucking way do we go? How do we build? We don't know. We don't have the education. We don't have all the pieces. Like Humpty Dumpty. We got a lot of work to do ahead of us. But this is the breaking point, I think, of that, to help us begin to find the pieces, pick them up, and put him back together again, And that's why I talk about this utopia and this age of Aquarius, where we really are going to have the ability to even see the light at the end of the tunnel with this. And the one other thing that I'll add that's super beautiful about this is the reason why I mentioned that Pluto energy is because not only is America having a Pluto return, so they're going to have to do some major detoxing and transformation. Pluto is the energy of these things that I'm talking about as well. Addictions, psychological and emotional dispels, that has been put on us. And that's in the South Node. Pluto, Scorpio South Node, Scorpio is ruled by Pluto. So we're going to have double, and there are a few other indications, but we have double the ability to release and let go permanently when we're talking about the South Node over the next 18 months, right? Over the next 18 months, we have that energy. We may only have Jupiter and Pisces until 5 months strongly, but we have the Pluto and South Node for 18 months, you see? And that's beautiful. I think that there are so many different endings. I can talk about this all day. I won't. I'll be doing the Jupiter and Pisces video next, and I'll try to focus more on Jupiter and how Jupiter is also the higher vibrations of that. And we already had Jupiter in the South Node. We got a clean slate there in that area of life. So look, family, this is it. Do not be afraid to dream and make it a reality.